contributors. Both Øystein and me really enjoy helping people. So we really enjoy the work on the help desk. And we want to talk about how to get a really good experience with this. So what kind of different help is there for you? What is it there that is available? When to ask for help? And then we will talk about support requests. And our goal is that you get quick and useful answers. So when we talk about how to write support requests, this is not to be bureaucratic. It's not to create any barriers. It's so that you get your answers sooner. Hopefully we have time to talk about reproducible examples and the value of growing a calculation and simplifying problems. And we want to improve your experience when solving issues. And one thing that makes me always a little bit sad is that every now and then I hear that somebody didn't write a question because they thought this was a, I don't know, stupid question, or they had a bad experience in the past because somebody maybe replied to them in a rude way on a different cluster. And many users are then scared to ask certain questions, and I think this is pity because there are no stupid questions, and this is a learning experience both for the user side and for the staff side. So how can we improve our experience? Here some credit to people and resources that I have learned from in the past. I think I want to highlight here that I have spent time on both sides, so both in research and in support. So I think I still know how that feels to ask a question, to wait for an answer, and to get a technical answer. Maybe let's start with a question like, where can I ask a question if I have a question? So is then where do you look for answers when you get an error message or something doesn't work, it crashes, or you are not sure how to do something with Slurm? Where do you start?
Usually Google, at least up until very recently. So if I get like a specific error message and I don't know what it does, I usually just copy it into Google as like the completely first step. Lately, I've been using ChatGPT quite a lot, actually, and it's really, really, really good at some things. And yeah, then escalate to colleagues. Maybe I have someone working together with me that would be able to answer this if I have an idea if they are working with the same things. And then I look at Stack Exchanges a lot, but that's usually through Google though. But and documentation is usually the last step.
Yeah, great. So here we have a list, and it's not a complete list, and also this order in which I wrote it down is not the order that everybody will go through. So these days, as you said, often it's the search engine. If I get an error message and I've never seen it before, I can take the whole error message, put it into a search engine. These days also there are AI-based chat solutions or chat with humans. If there is a colleague in the corridor who maybe knows more about Unix Slurm, I can ask the colleague. Many of us do not have the luxury. So I know that some of you can feel a bit isolated in your research groups. Maybe there is no colleague who knows more about these things. And this is also a good moment for me to advertise that we have sessions, Q&A sessions once per month, where you can drop in and ask any computing, storage, HPC related questions or office hours, how to find this stuff. So if I go on documentation sigma2.no, and we should paste the link to the document, and I will do that. Here, open questions and answer session for all users. And the next one is, wait a moment. Is that updated now? We need to update the page. All right, but I'll paste the link. So we need to do some updating here unless I... So this is the next one, April 27. Come by, ask any question, we will help. One thing also we started to do here at UIT in Tromsø is to have weekly office hours, and people can ask about software and high performance computing. Øystein, you mentioned documentation.
Yeah,
but there is also
well, we have a question here: how to use ChatGPT to ask for errors, and I want to just answer that a bit, because it's basically you just ask it. The more information you give it, the more context it has, and if you just ask it how, so if you ask it it is actually really good at looking at code. So you can actually give it, as long as your code isn't too long, you can just give it your code and say what error you get, and it in many cases will identify problems and stuff like that. Or you can just give it the error code and it will give you an explanation on what you can try to fix it. So it's, yeah, it doesn't work for everything. Remember that this ChatGPT is trained on the dataset. If the exact problem is included in the dataset, then it will be able to help you. If it's not part of the dataset, it will not.
Yeah. And here I want to focus a bit on the issue tracker. So this is the traditional way to contact us, getting help. And then typically you send us an email, support@NRIS.no. And when you send us an email to this email address, it will, on our side, it opens something we call the ticket or an issue. So we have an issue tracker, and these requests are numbered, and then we work on them. And for you, it will be an email conversation. And we will talk about this a little bit, how to make that work really well. Moving on, good advice I got somewhere is that when I go through this list, search engine, ChatGPT, documentation, I give myself a time limit. Okay, I will now try to work on it for, I don't know, 10 minutes or 1 hour. And if I fail, then I go to the next step. And then if I can't figure it out, I will go to the Q&A session, the open office, the office hours. And sometimes all you want is advice. Sometimes you want that we do something for you, like please install the software, or please help me overcome this bottleneck. And how can we communicate this? Good to always remember, and I try to remind myself also when working as staff, is there is always a human on the other side. Maybe the person asking has 20 years less experience in whatever, Unix, Slurm, programming, and we have to remember that we always have to be respectful. Maybe the person on the other side has spent 2 weeks on this problem and is waiting now for days for an answer. And always, as staff, we need to be respectful. It's also good to know for when you send us an email, I think it can be useful to know that we don't know everything. There will be many situations where the user asking knows much more about that problem than we do, because we do many different things. We don't do exclusively user support. We don't exclusively work on the supercomputer either. Maybe we don't have any context with you yet. We also have like a staff rotation system. So next week, somebody else might be working on the problem. So creating this context can be very useful. So what does that mean? And before going there, I want to share my first ever technical email request, which didn't work well, but I learned from it. I wanted somebody to share. I wanted access to their code. This was before GitHub, and so I wrote this very long email, many paragraphs, very respectful, to addressing the professor to please give me access to the code and how it would benefit me and how I will be very careful with it. But among the many, many paragraphs and the whole novel, it was, I think, not very clear what I actually wanted. And so sometime later, I got this very short answer. Hi, I guess what you meant asking in between all those paragraphs was, can I please get the code X? And yes, here it is. And I was both happy, but I also felt a bit, I felt like I didn't ask the right way. And over time, now I know better how to communicate what I really wanted. So let's take it a little bit apart. Subject line. So when you send an email and it opens a ticket on our site, the subject line can already help a lot. Because when we see a subject that says problem, it takes more time. We have to go in, we have to read actually everything. It makes it more difficult for us to channel it to the right team or the right person. So this could be a better subject line. Then we already know, this is somebody tries to run a job script, it's crashing. I have a better, even before looking at the email, I have a better idea of what this is about.
Yeah, just to highlight, so we are quite a few people working in NRIS, and we all have our different fields of expertise. So having a good subject line means that the right person will have a greater chance of actually seeing your ticket, meaning you will get an answer quicker and more accurately. And yeah.
And more about that context, because we are, as Øystein said, we are, I don't know how many, 50 people, but rotating, working on many different things, different expertise. And I don't even know how many users there are, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000, I'm not sure. But we don't always have the context. So how can you help us with the context? And that is, if meaningful, please give us a username. We can figure it out from your email, but it takes a few minutes. It's not the most exciting work. So if you tell us the username, it's easier. If you tell us that, oh yeah, I have this example and you can find it in my home/Sampath, then this is more useful, because here I know exactly where to go. Here I don't know where to go, because for me this means something different than for you. Here I need to find out where is the home really. So explicit paths. Which machine is it? We have several resources. We have 3 clusters. Actually, there are even more clusters. So which cluster is it? Or which storage solution is it? Or which software, which research field, if meaningful? Also, if you have modified your environment, so maybe you put something in your bash RC that I don't have, because my bash RC is different. Tell me about it. Because sometimes we have to spend a couple of emails to figure out that you are module loading some software in your bash RC that I don't have, and so it behaves differently for me than for you. Text is sometimes better than screenshot, because then I can mouse select out of the text example. You can send attachments, they can be better than screenshot. But also screenshot is better than nothing. This can be also useful. So we have, as staff, in principle, we have the possibility to open up any file on the system, but we don't do that because we really respect privacy, which means that we will always ask you before we look at anybody's files. And to speed up the system, you can tell us that here's an example, and yes, you can really open it up. And then we know that we can do that. It makes it faster.
Because the alternative is we actually have to write an email only to ask you, can I look into your files? And then in most cases, you will answer, yes, you can look into my files. And that's a couple of hours of waiting without any real work being done on your issue.
The other thing that can be really useful to know is, so if you have a problem, something crashed, you have an error message. What is really useful to know is, has it ever worked? Or is it the first time you're trying? And often that is not clear from the email. Like, I don't know, maybe you are new on the cluster, you are trying something new and it crashes. And that's a very different problem than if it has been working for the last 6 weeks and since Tuesday it stopped working. Because then I know where to look. Then I remember, oh yeah, Tuesday we did this configuration on the cluster, maybe we broke it. So already this simple information can help us to look into the right place. It can also help us to tell you, if you tell us what you are trying to accomplish. So the actual goal, not just the error message. What are you really after? And we will come back to that. What did you do? So if you want us to do anything with the problem, try to make it reproducible. So if it is helpful for us to run it, we will need all the files and we will need to know all the steps that you did. Again, to avoid that we have to figure it out through 10 emails. When to ask for help? I don't know, Øystein, should people wait? Should they work on it a little bit on their own? Should they ask straight away? What do you recommend?
Like, bare minimum of trying to fix the problem is usually helpful. Like doing a quick Google search or trying to run it again is a really good start. But don't be afraid to ask us, but just be aware, if you send us an email, you can expect, like within office hours, you will usually get an answer within a couple of hours, and then there will be some back and forth to establish all the context needed and stuff like that. So spending a little bit of time before asking is really helpful, not to save us from work, but to get your problem resolved as quickly as possible, because quite often someone else has had the problem before you, and you will be able to find it on Google or ChatGPT or so spending a couple of minutes is a good thing.
Yeah. And it's not about, as Øystein said, it's not about saving my 2 minutes. But if you spend a little bit on the problem, it often creates more sharper questions, and it can save hours, because then we go directly to the right person, we go directly to the right team. But please do send us questions. Don't hesitate too long either. If in doubt, send a question. And I also don't see too many questions here on the Hedgehog, which I would love to get more questions and comments there, so please do write. Tell us what you have tried. Again, has it stopped working, or has it ever worked? It's so useful to know. If it fails, does it always fail this way? Have you tried a couple of times? Does it always fail at the same point? Because that can hint us towards maybe there's a hardware problem on certain compute nodes. And if your job is unlucky and runs on that node, it fails. So the knowledge of, like, if you know that it always fails 5 minutes into the job, tell us about it, then we know. If you have tried to isolate, simplify the problem, how did you do that? More about this later. And I would like to know talk about the XY problem. What is that? This is something that I experience like once per week. Go ahead.
Could I just on the last slide just highlight something? Because about the spending a little bit time before you send us a question is these things on this slide you will usually be asked to do anyways in order for us to actually figure out what the problem is. So doing this before you send the question is a real time saver actually for both us and you, because you will usually have to do it anyways.
Exactly, great point. And so thanks for also the question on document. When should people contact NRIS and when Sigma 2? And so NRIS, anything technical, contact Sigma 2, anything about your, if you need more compute quota, more storage quota, you have trouble adding your colleagues to your project, then it's Sigma 2. And we are aware that this is unfortunate to have 2 email addresses, and we are working on it. So ideally, there should only be 1 contact email address, and ideally we should sort it out within the organization. So the reason that we have 2 email addresses is technical, but we know about it and we are working on smoothing this out. So I'll just also reply there. Oops, Sigma 2, anything about accounts. Okay, and let's talk about the XY problem. So this is something I see roughly, I don't know, every week, every second week, is that I want to do something X and I try it, because now we learned that it's good to try it at least for a few minutes before writing the email. So I'm trying it out. And I think now I do a bit of web search, AI, and the internet tells me that if I want to do X, I should do this. So now I think that, it's because I don't do Y, that's the problem. And now I try it and I have a problem with it. I have an error message. And now I write to the support and I tell them I have this error message, please help me. And then we work on it, and maybe it takes hours or maybe days. And after 20 emails later, 2 weeks later, after much interaction, we find out that we were working on this thing, but it wasn't what the user really wanted to do is X, but they never told us. And what we were working on wasn't even the best solution to achieve X. So we wasted time. What would have been good here to communicate, yes, you have a problem with, you hit a problem, but what you really wanted to do was X. Please tell us about the X. Because sometimes the solution is then to do something completely differently. And there is also a reminder for us as staff is to sometimes read a little bit in between the lines, because sometimes we see that there is an easy solution, easy for us, but sometimes it's not the best solution for the user. And there we need to be a bit careful and sometimes offer them a different solution that is maybe more work for us, but it will be better for the user in the long term. I really like to look at these 2 examples. So I will show you 2 example requests, and we can discuss what do we like about them. I think they are really good. Let me read it out for you. So one here, somebody wrote that, let's all think here, what is so nice about this request? Hi, I'm user something, and I'm on the cluster saga. I needed to write this because sometimes I give this presentation outside of Norway and then they don't know what saga is. So I'm on the cluster saga, and since this morning, I can't log in anymore. I've tried to log in into From and Betsy, and this works. And I use SSH keys to log in, and the error that I get since this morning is this one. Thanks in advance, and looking forward to hear how to solve this. Øystein, what are the things that you like about this request?
He specifically mentions both his username right away and that it stopped working this morning, I can imply from that it worked before. If not, that's a really poorly worded email, but I'm implying from that it stopped working today, meaning I have somewhere to start looking in time. It's also really good that he specifically mentions that it is working on Frammen, let's say. So it's isolated to Saga. And I get this error message and how he's logging in. So it's actually really well for.
Yeah, so I really like the context in both in space, we know where. It's somehow it's on this cluster, not on the other clusters. I also like the time context since this morning. So probably from this I can see that the person was able to log in earlier. Something changed this morning. Probably it changed only on this cluster. I also like that I can see that the person tried something before, like shooting the email out of the hip. And only based on this email, we get a lot of information. And from this error message, I will have immediately an idea that probably something changed in the home folder of that user on the Saga cluster. And I will probably be able to solve this in 5 minutes based on this really nicely formulated email. So there's a lot of good information in here. Let's look at another example. And I'm aware of the time. So we will conclude. So let's spend maybe 7 more minutes on this presentation and then to give a bit time for additional Q&A. I'm also grateful that if I look at the collaborative document, you can find a feedback section. So please use this to tell us what went well, what is it that we should keep, what is it that we should change, remove, add, something that didn't go well. Okay, back to the presentation, another example. Let me read it out for you. So hi, I'm not sure I wrote the right support line, but what I'm looking for is a virtual machine where we can install a PHP web server with some database behind it. What we have in mind is to set up a service where we can share the data from our recent study. The data can be fully public. It's about 2,000 records, so it's not much data, and we would like to create a web front end where people can search through and plot our data. Looking forward to hearing from you whether this is possible and what you think about our approach. Øystein, what do you like about this one? What is really good about this request?
Going back to the XY problem, he is actually formulating what is the end goal of the thing, not only the technical thing he is working on right now, which is setting up a PHP server, but also what he wants as the end goal. That's a really good thing. He's also specifying the scale of it, like it's about 2,000 records, so that tells me how.
Yeah,
that's a great starting point for finding out what kind of solution would be the most appropriate.
Exactly. I really like this because if I stopped reading here, I would go in and okay, let's somehow set up a MySQL database and some web server, and then I will spend 1 day on it, and then I reply done, and here it is. But I really like that they wrote what they really want to do with it, because maybe this is not even the best solution. Maybe there is a different solution. And in reality, in this particular example, so this is a real example, it turned out that there was a better solution for their problem. I also like that they write that the data can be public, so I get a feeling that this is probably not patient data. It's not, probably I can put it on GitHub. Also the size. So this was really useful, what they really wanted to do. So here we can give much better help. All right, just looking at the time and looking at the HedgeDoc, I think we have a few more minutes.
Also, both the emails were quite polite and pleasant to read. That's also actually a good thing.
Yeah. And we as staff also have always to reply politely as well. And sometimes I've seen that, of course, we always want to be polite, but we are also technical. Sometimes it can read a bit harsh. So good reminder for everybody. There is always a human on the other side. A few more minutes on first time on a new machine, or it can be the same machine, but new program or different system, different system that we try to study. And this is coming back a bit to how to calibrate, how to simplify, how to grow, and how this can be so super useful also when you find a problem. So this is how I like to start when I'm on a new machine or a new program. I try to start with a short 5-minute run on one core. And this will take me a bit to debug, but the calculations are quick. They don't spend much time in the queue. And once this is working, then I go to more cores, if applicable, or to more nodes. And then I increase the system size. And this way, I learn a lot about what my calculation actually needs. And I can provide better parameters. And how is that useful? Mm-hmm.
Could I just shoot in something that is specific to our clusters? All our clusters has a separate quality of service called Devil, which is specifically meant for testing while you're trying to figure out how to run your program, which has a higher priority than all the other queues, meaning that it will, that's a really good place to start, and it has some quite severe limitations for it in terms of runtime and the amount of nodes you can use. But trying to stay within those limitations, your job will start almost immediately at all times instead of actually having to queue. So if you're running multiple tests to try to figure out how the program can be run, trying to stay within the limitations of Devil is a really good thing.
Yeah, great advice. So we start on the development queue, and then I grow out of it and go into the standard queue. And looking at questions on HedgeDoc, should we first fill up all the CPUs on one node before we go to other nodes? Personally, I scale the number of cores, and I don't specify the number of nodes. This depends on the machine, so it depends where you are. It depends whether you are on Saga or on Betsy. But if I don't have to specify the number of nodes, I only specify the number of cores, and I don't care where they are. I take 5 cores from this node, 10 cores from the other node. I let the scheduler figure it out. And the advantage is that my job will start sooner. But sometimes you have to fill up the cores in a nice way. Sometimes it's multiplicative. So if I have to, I do it. But if I don't have to, I only specify the number of cores because I will get them sooner.
That will also depend on your workload, because like intercommunications between threads and stuff like that might be several orders of magnitude slower if you're located on different nodes. So you might have something that scales really well as long as you're on the same node. But once you divide into 2 nodes, everything halts.
Yeah, but very often, I would say most of the cases, it doesn't matter. But sometimes it matters. And if it doesn't matter, then if the communication is not dominating, then they can be anywhere. If the communication is the bottleneck, then it matters where they are. And then they better stay together. Yes, I think I want to still show this slide, and that is this small reproducible example is something that is useful to have. Many people struggle with creating it. Depending on if this is an interactive job or a job script, make it reproducible for us. Make it as small as possible. So try to simplify the problem to a shorter, smaller run with all dependencies loaded, all batteries included. This will make it so much easier for us to rerun the same problem and diagnose it. Attach all the necessary files. And the advantage of creating it, it will take time. This is an effort. But the advantage of having this small, nice, reproducible example is that often when you simplify the problem, so often making the problem smaller actually reveals the problem. It can identify the reason because it reduces the number of possible reasons. And if you have like a short example that you know well, you know that this always works, it takes 5 minutes. Next time you hit a problem and you are not sure, like, is it me or is it them? Did they do something with the cluster or did I change something in my scripts accidentally? Then I can run my small example that I know, that I trust, and it will tell me whether this is I changed something or the cluster changed something. And then I can send this example to the user support and tell them, here's my example. This always works. Now it suddenly doesn't work. Something must have changed on your side. And then we can take this small example and immediately start debugging without a lot of email back and forth. Good. I think we are maybe almost out of time, but I still want to take time to look at the questions coming in.